Yeah, hopefully this camera will not cut off. Um, yeah, because I didn't have it completely set up. In any case, so like it's kind of like talking about Michael Jackson and Jackson 5. Trump had mentioned something about Make America Great Again. That's kind of like thinking about the color of money and Alpha America 72 and Kobe ID 19 and all the Alpha America 72 and 1972. Being something about like the Alpha America 91 in the future, but anyway, I was kind of like thinking about that Jackson 5 Destiny compact disc with like Michael Jackson, that song Blame It on a Boogie. And I was thinking about it because, most of this is like 7-1 in Pearland, okay? And Michael Jackson's thing about his choreography when he dances and his toes and pronunciation of toes, like towing and like tugboats and towing and, importing, exporting, with shipment, entering and exiting like ports, um, you know, um, involving towing, but in pronunciation, like with linguistic alphanumerics, it kind of presents something I was thinking about, like some of the phrases of the Blaming on the Bookie. And I saw the lightning lead me, and my baby just can't take her eyes off me. Don't blame it on the sunshine. Don't blame it on the moonlight. Don't blame it on the good times. Blame it on the boogie. The thing about it is that it seemed to be that when I saw the lightning lead me, it's kind of like Moses on a plateau, because Michael Jackson, his choreography, and his way he danced and choreography, his saying is about the toes and the plateau. And the thing about Moses is that when he received the Ten Commandments, is that he's on a flat plane surface, a plateau, kind of like a pi square that would represent maybe the half the distance to like a summit, the peaking point of like a mountain or a pyramid. And it's referred to as a flat plane, as what would be like a plateau. Likewise, in addition, like the Lord Jesus Christ going to Mount Olives after the resurrection, after the third day, resurrecting and going to Mount Olives, and it being a plateau. And in one way, after the resurrection, which the baptism I might consider talking a little bit, but it seemed the representative of the Christianity, and the thing about the baptism representing the before, during, and after thing about um, you know um, the resurrection, and ultimately going to Mount Olives, which is a plateau, and then ascending in the sky, and then re-entering heaven. The one word in Book of Thessalonians, being down from verse 192, the word transfiguration, and how it's applied like to the U.S. $1 bill on the backside of the pyramid, above the pyramid, the Anuit Comptus, and the value of 204 based upon the symbolic representation being, like a mandatory minimum and max at the same time of the alphanumerics of 58. And gets to the principle of like McDonald's golden arches above, the equator, the operator, the center line of oscillation of one frequency, half above and below. And like McDonald's golden arches, a practical application, once again, like side by side of a degree level reputable standards of consensual participation apply to that half cycle above and below, becoming side by side, like the electronic schematic fish of a symbolic representation of, like Christianity that many Christians put on their vehicles or cars, with like troops and soldiers, normally involving like the charitable cause. They have the ribbon that is similar in appearance. The ribbon similar to the electronic schematic fish, the symbolic representation of Christianity. Um, Although it is a schematic about the half cycle above a frequency having the center line of oscillation, measuring 1 cycle per second in oscillation that way, but it becoming side by side a practical application of principle applied based upon McDonald's golden arches that way, and it becomes a thing about swimming upstream in the latter, and ultimately the idea of like the misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi, and affirmative lobby tube, and the thing about architecture platform embedded encryption, um, and ultimately even the kernel involving like what would be considered a partition. If a partition involving a kernel, not limited to the Ajax language, a bunch of white stuff about an Ajax language having like the alphanumerics of 36. The thing with this is that the partition sometimes involved with the kernel, it doesn't really identify whether or not, if that's only based upon a deed restriction based upon television programming, um, a kernel in like computer programming and language, and a kernel in military. The pronunciation is the same, and its practical application in that way that involves obviously like litigation, de facto, writ habeas corpus, or deed restrictions, or mechanics liens, and the idea of like even practicing a certain factor that would include probably the thought of you know um, foster granting, adoption using family law, given the idea that foster granting, what would be the practical application of like combining a student loan with a Pell Grant, um, foster granting the idea of like of adoption using family law, and it becoming some idea of manufactured like relation based upon the presence and pronunciation, normally um, that's sometimes identified as case precedents, or the thought of previous being used as a standard, a guide, as an already experience. I don't want to limit it to the idea of like situational as circumstantial, or the idea of cross-referencing that would maybe be some idea of um, deviation other than maybe circumstances that would be maybe a multitude of factors involved or not involved. In any case, so like it seemed to be the thing that Michael Jackson's song, let me get back to Michael Jackson, Jackson 5. It seemed to be the thing about Jackson 5. It's like the pi r squared, or the E equal MC squared of a 10-star general. Or the humor, a little bit of humor. It's really, like reading Braille in the elevator, whether it's the left wing or right wing. Although, applied a little bit of humor about the relation, and the relation really is the word about, architecture and platform, embedding encryption, yet in degree definition of its intended use of computer programming language, embedding encryption is not quite the same. Like linguistic alphanumerics, it's normally based upon pronunciation. Normally not the perception of like what is found in the dictionary as a degree intended use, but based upon pronunciation of a combine of like experience of like even syllables, and where that's normally used at and common as a majority based upon a perception of like the study of language. In any case, so like Michael Jackson is like singing a song, Blame It on a Boogie. Okay, it's like, when I seen the lightning leave me, and my baby just can't take her eyes off me. Don't blame it on the sunshine. Don't blame it on the moonlight. Don't blame it on the good times. Blame it on the boogie. Well, like boogie and bogey is kind of like like Air Force pilot terminology of affirmative action. About a bogey, and likewise, like you'll hear it on like on par on golf courses sometimes. But the thing with this is that it seemed to be the idea of the difference between bogey and boogie would almost be like the pi r squared, a practical application applying itself based upon pronunciation only, as compared to the 3.1416 multiplied by the radius squared, getting the diameter of a circle. But likewise, in addition, getting the diameter of a circle, which is normally just the area of a circle of a flat plane surface, as compared to circumference, the way kind of like I see the thing about three-dimensional of actual participation, and circumference being the idea of 3D isometric volume. And the thing with this is that more of a cylindrical than a flat plane area of a circle of a flat plane surface. In any case, so like the thing about that seemed to be about that song "Blame It on the Boogie" a little bit, and as compared to the buggy, and it's like when I saw the lightning leave me, it's like Moses getting the 10 Commandments on the plateau. Michael Jackson's thing about choreography and the way he dances. The toes in a plateau seem to be the thing about Moses being 71 in Pearland. And ultimately, even, 5 commandments on each tablet being like 5 stars on each of a 10-star general. Or the E equal MC squared, yet it seemed to be the thing about Texas and Mexico power as compared to Centerpiint energy, which is identified as a smart meter, being alphanumeric 71 in Pearland. And that, one cycle of frequency measured in the center line of oscillation at a 9 degree would put the like the center point, the circle with the dot in it, or what a pylon would look like, or like even the 7-point crown of the Statue of Liberty. Measuring 1 cycle per second, and a frequency and oscillation with a center line of oscillation at 9 degree, be it a circle with a dot in it, okay? And it almost presents, like the euro dollar that way, and like Diners Club, even a pie chart that would represent maybe the 90 degree, how I see that on the left side of the symbolic representation between the C and the PTIS on the back side of the US $1. Yet the most minimum requirement seem to be like the minimum required and the maximum requirement based upon probably the norm of realizing quantum being involved, with the alphanumerics of 59 would be the only thing about the alphanumerics of 58 would be like McDonald's Golden Arches and McDonald's Hot Cafe Coffee Cup. Like when I was figuring it out, I wasn't thinking about really McDonald's or a Hot Cafe coffee cup, but those are the actual letters in combined with 3 simple methods of, computation involving simple addition. It's the actual letters that ultimately, like when they're rearranged, it didn't automatically be, 58 in Hot Cafe. It's like it was like a bunch of alphanumeric values attached to letters and ultimately, rearranging the letters and going, hey, that's Hot Cafe, like McDonald's Golden Arches and the Hot Cafe coffee cup, the alphanumerics of 58. And, I kind of realized that, but it seemed to be the thing about Highway 59, okay, being like one of the oldest national landmarks in alphanumerics of 140. And this being Pearland, Texas. And the thing about, one additional value, what would normally be vertical as 1, is at a 90 degree. And it's almost like the Sarbanes and Oxley financial instruments of SOX compliance about that 90 degree and the EE that way, and almost like the European standard of the symbolic representation of a European standard in the International Electronic Engineering Organization identifying, the minimum of 240 volts of a commercial venue of a European standard, yet American as it gets, as far as like a living quarter, a commercial venue, a living quarter that's not affected by television programming or a carbon footprint or absentee voting or, a mechanics lien. Or anything about, television in any neighborhood, which seemed to be predominantly of monetary and domestic aggregates in that way. But it's kind of like listening to the song because, like on my channel, Wade ASV, Pretty PRIDDY at YouTube.com, I do Michael Jackson and predominantly Off the Wall, because Off the Wall has really gotten to my thought of Michael Jackson's initial being MJ and like the alphanumerics is 23. And, the thing that I see Michael Jackson as the alphanumerics of 23 seem to be quite a bit about the graphite, the little fine granular metallic particles that's in even the paste of fingerprints, Mobile One oil, and even dry toner of like the copying process, and is representative of like a conversion from paper made, and paper that would require, the paste of fingerprints. Ultimately, biometrics and electronic, leaving the paper, paper made is like 56:10 automatically in my mind. And ultimately, a combination of numerical and alphanumerical, the alphanumerics of 94 and Roe v. Wade, the thing about annotated adoption and abortion, and even Y2K and alphanumerics of 94. My name is Wade, okay? And, the thing is just that, I've been doing quite a bit about, the front lines of the beachfront and what vice president networks mean at the front lines of the beachfront, and like how my name is like, like really, am I experiencing something about my name that for like, decades maybe I didn't think was even the issue, seemingly really involved, whether I knew it or not, really. And the thing with this is that I've been doing quite a bit about my name and something amphibious involving, the acronym FBI, or not really the acronym, but it's a known fact about the Federal Bureau of Investigation, referring to itself as the FBI, but it's still an acronym in linguistic alphanumerics in that way. The alphanumerics is 17, okay, or Q, okay. The thing with it is that that seemed to be the issue with like the colors of the Air Force One, like during 1995, which actually presented the acronym as like a foreign bureau intelligence or interrogation, and the actual midnight blue, which is predominantly a governmental color of uniform of like 1995, and actually identifying what the FBI really does is protect movies of other regions. and doesn't even have to represent the U.S. dollar, although it sounds like English. The acronym, it's a known fact about the FBI protecting, movies and motion pictures in that way. Don't explain one thing really about it at all. Most people that when they watch TV or DVD and they see protected by the FBI, they automatically think and assume it's just limited to like Region 1 because it's in English and like North America, when in fact, in reality, it's the option of whenever. And it seemed to be involving, the idea of like of a carbon footprint and absentee voting. Whether non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization is the only idea of intellectual property having fair use of international law dictating whether or not, if some degree level, a reputable standards would include, something beyond a method of banking, something like human capital, and like seemingly the, United States, $1,000 of Grover Cleveland representing, and even including the thing about Zion and 1,000 Years of Peace and $1,000 of Grover Cleveland, U.S. president. And it seemed to be really, the thing about the American religion that I didn't really think would be even really an issue, provided that a King James Version Bible represents Israel. Okay, this is like Pearland, Texas. Okay, the alphanumerics of 140, attenuation, even Highway 59, and what I'm really referring to about the symbolic representation on the backside of the U.S. $1 bill, equating to 3 simple methods of addition, accomplishing a combine of option of what's available. The symbolic representation is like a minimum of 58, yet only one more vertically. Is really the thing about quantum Japanese, being 71 in Pearland. And, looking at calculus with a different design E, that's in calculus, but it does not have the structure that quantum does. That different design E, informative computation in structure and quantum, is in calculus as the different design E. My automatic thought of like Star Furniture and that specific spokeswoman presenting, the different design E as Star Furniture. That the idea of structure of the different design E in calculus, the alphanumerics are 92, calculus being 92, or like a drummer or pentagon. And going into quantum, the alphanumerics of like 107, Diners Club and military and all that. It seemed to be the difference that the different design E is about the EE on the back side of the US $1 bill, a transition from calculus to quantum. Calculus not having a structure that quantum does. Yet the EE that would almost be representative, like the difference between corporate and business law. But quantum having a structure, there's like 2 symbols. I wasn't even looking for it. I just, like, was my first thought when I saw it. Hey, that looks like Japanese. Reading Japanese from top to bottom, and reading English from left to right, it's like, the E equal MC squared and the pi are squared of like monetary and domestic aggregates of like neighborhoods, yet gross national product of commercial venue of living quarter of exponential quotients of powers of multiplication, reading Japanese from top to bottom. And, like I was looking, and a little bit about that different design E, transitioning from calculus into quantum, and realizing that the word structure is like a corporate term involving identifying an eternal entity as an eternal structure of corporate law, which is based upon, spiritual principles that can be found in corporate law, even the book of Ecclesiastes, and even the clergy thing about, even the United States Secretary of Treasury and the scribe, the tribe of Reuben being a tribe of scribes. Yet corporate terminology will identify clergy as clergy at corporate terms, associating, what the difference between a nonprofit organization as a corporate nonprofit organization. It's almost like the national deficit available in closed caption for the hearing impaired. Or sometimes it seemed to be, whether or not if the thing about, difference between why a nonprofit organization, why the Fifth Amendment is not a nonprofit organization, seem to be, that thing about, the structure in another practical application that ultimately seems to be getting to the difference between Lockheed Martin, the 2 arrows, the 4 lines, and 3 intersecting axes of Lockheed Martin. Yet it presents, the arrows as like arrows, but, with the lines, it would be eccentric triangles. And somewhere in my mind, I haven't even looked at it other than the mere thought of like, maybe, the double forward slash is like, the lines are there. as an eccentric triangle or a plane horizon, identifying a plane horizon in like international financial management of importing and exporting of plane horizons, the eccentric triangles, as compared to the pie chart of like business law, the little circle with a percentile of what would look like maybe triangles, but not a plane horizon as an eccentric triangle that international law dictates as importing and exporting as a main source of like gross national product, normally like with the U.S. patented being a U.S. patented product that's protected of importing and exporting. And normally the word is tariff that normally involves that, yet at the same time it's almost like a commercial venue of living quarters have an obstruction of justice of appreciation, not depreciation. And that seemed to be the thing of television programming involving, what deed restrictions are, the DR of Dr. Pepper, and the color code. And it seemed to be the Michael Jackson thing of the AffirmativeAction 23 of, Dr. Pepper being like a deed restriction. And the thing with this is that, the AffirmativeAction 23 is like the W, or, the CEO, corporate executive officer, and, the AffirmativeAction 23. Yet it presents the 23-year anniversary celebration of Dr. Pepper and the 23 ingredients. And it is 23 ingredients of Dr. Pepper. The thing with it is that once again, that song, Blame It on a Boogie, it's kind of like, it's like Moses, like getting the 10 Commandments. And I saw the lightning lead me. It's like Moses getting, the 10 Commandments, etched, with lightning on 2 tablets. And my baby, it's like Babylon and Pearland in 71, Moses being 71, and baby being 30, like Vantage Love 30. Yet Babylon is 71, like Pearland. And the thing about it, it really seemed to be the issue of like whether or not to combine a pseudo with a Pell Grant. It's just like foster granting and adoption. And I mean, like a geographic way, or, some idea of like, looking for an umbilical cord in space exploration for the mother lode, in search of some idea of a novice attempt to complete some idea of a relationship beyond a diaper of an entire lifetime. Okay, I mean, far beyond like not cool for someone like me having to even say something like that. The thing with this is that, or even on it, really, the thing with this is that really, if it presents the idea of a deed restriction based upon some idea of what is normally termed in construction, as OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and at one cycle of frequency that's sometimes confused the difference between waveform and frequency. It's really the only thing about processing speed. Processing speed increasing or decreasing doesn't change a frequency as waveform. It just changes the pitch and tone based upon the speed of it processing. And the faster it goes, the narrower it gets, then it becomes like a flat line and a real high-pitched tone and waveform. It's really not that at all. It maintains its integrity of like tonal quality and pitch and everything. And only speeding up the processing would be the same of waveform, not a change that would be representative as frequency, but it's not frequency, it's waveform. Speeding it up wouldn't change the pitch or tone, or its shape as and there seem to be the increments of like the 24, 48, 72, and 96 increments. And I'm going to have to get into the difference between like auditing live on air legal media as like quantum and vertical, and not an issue of like the possibility of post-production or editing. It's like live on air, as compared to the idea of like Washington Post presenting television as like Washington, Outmax 130, and the Post being some idea of like a deposition. Legal media and deposition, it's like the before and after. Apply to like the acronym HOA, Homeowners Association, the HOA, and the Washington Post. Or my name is like Wade Pretty, okay, the same initials as WP. Yeah, it kind of like it presents the idea of Washington Post is like legal media and deposition. The before and after apply to Hoa, and it being like Whoopa, the Israeli bird. It's one bird. It is blue and purple. And it seemed to be almost like where the separation of church and state really is at with linguistic alphanumerics and English that way. And it seemed to be that the pi r squared, the e equal mc squared, and an exponential quotient of powers of multiplication, defining the difference between business and corporate law of importing and exporting, and like eternal treasuries, or some idea of like a duration that some departmental heads actually claim to actually request as normally 10-year periods of like what is sometimes called like a budget. Others on an annual basis would maybe call it a fiscal annual, based upon business law. In any case, so like the thing with this is that defining the meaning between like what seemed to be the commercial value of living quarter of like gross national product and the exponential quotients of powers of multiplication based upon it being like vertical and not a question of like deed restrictions or carbon footprints or absentee voting as a vice president network presenting the issues of immigration customs enforcement or the vice president network thing about it, or importing and exporting in a way that would be maybe not necessarily the degree yet of neighborhoods of monetary and domestic. And it seemed to be, almost like the Charles Barkley statement, anything less would be uncivilized. And it seemed to be, really something that would represent, the difference between monetary and domestic as 2 9-hole golf courses. Of the thought of neighborhoods being made of wood. And I'd mentioned something about the wooden buffalo nickel. And the thing about the wooden buffalo nickel is that it was about coffee. And wooden being like the alphanumerics of 76, which seems to be the thing about, 1976 and Flag Day. And, like Richard Nixon, presidential terms in office, as well as the 200-year celebration of America, the 200-year celebration. The thing with this is that the wooden buffalo nickel representing coffee, it's almost like monetary and domestic identifying neighborhoods of what 2 9-hole golf courses mean to leases as grant. The practical application of his name alone, like combining a student loan with a Pell Grant, or appreciation and depreciation, representing, what a deed restriction seemed to be of a PG-13 rating, a presidential governors, and like parental guidance, and what television programming means. If it's ultimately getting to the idea of knowing or not knowing, something about Pearland, really I kind of see it, as a fortunate thing, but I haven't heard not one word. And to my fascination at in the beginning 1992 of like alphanumerics only, normally it was like looking back, it was like an automatic 5 years before I even considered it being anything other than alphanumerics, and then really started, introducing myself to the thought of applying, the study of language, the word linguistics, and adding, the whole thought of pronunciation beyond just alphanumeric value and of degree definition of intended use, and getting into the pronunciation of linguistic and including symbolic and analytical that way. And when the M is in is reversed, and M is in, N is M, 13 is 14, 14 is 13. The Pentagon Reserve reverse, and like the intelligence and the opposite. It became the whole entire different approach to how I started looking and studying linguistic alphanumerics, one on alphanumerical and numerical, like monetary and domestic on one side, and then, the symbolic based on pronunciation itself, not limited to, a degree definition of intended use that's normally in the dictionary, sometimes more so than not, based upon pronunciation of symbolic and analytical is normally not defined in the dictionary, yet is a comprehension of that kind of study that develops into progressively, ultimately the real answer about, comprehension and reading and analytical and symbolic, and how it seemed to be like involving like the Stargate program in that way, more so of like symbolic and analytical practical application, and thoroughly, years and years of studying linguistic alphanumerics. But in any case, so like it had ultimately got to the Boolean chart, and the being venue going through like a circuit on, the Bluebird bus, even the American Express Bluebird card with the gold edge, a 15-digit card with the gold edge. The thing with it is that it seemed to be the thing about, like Judy Garland, somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly, and the rainbow being like at Fort Stockton, Texas thing. In my mind of Summit meeting and the Plateau thing about, James and All Unit and the Permian Basin, even television series like Friday Night Lights, something about an experience that seemed to be originating as Flag Day during 6th, 7th, and 8th grade of students holding their hands around the flagpole and praying around the flagpole. Ultimately, in my mind, years later, which is now like going on 30, 35 years later, maybe a little bit longer, really, seemingly a Six Flag, I mean, reach out and touch someone. I mean, like Southwestern Bell for real, and the Better Business Bureau, Bird Bath Baptism, and something about seriously. I mean, for real, about the thing about the, and identify, Bird Bath Baptism is like the globalization, a spherical quadrant of the globe as like a bird bath as compared to the Chinese walk, an Oriental walk being amphibious like J. Edgar Hoover, and not a jaywalk, but amphibious in that way, almost like the second coming of Christ, or, going to Mount Olives and sitting in the sky. Even Moses on a plateau coming down, and, some factors about that would even include hot air balloons and barometric pressure and, raising a bar as a plane horizon of an altimeter, even a central triangle, like a, import and exporting, defining like gross national product. As a plane horizon, as the centered triangle. And it seemed to be the thing about, the Dolphin battery powered like Bluetooth, loudspeaker, presenting, the Dolphin like as like Miami on the Atlantic side, what has been known as the eccentric triangle of the Bermuda Triangle. Thing of it is that I'm not really trying to think in the way of the Bermuda Triangle, but more so along the lines of the eccentric triangle of plane horizons. That has identified what is the similarities in percentage on a huge, larger scale of international import and exporting on a worldwide level as compared to the percentage, what is only in a circle with like a center point with a dot with like percentage of a pie chart as compared to a plane horizon, an eccentric triangle. Yeah, so like any case, so like I was thinking about that because that Jackson5 thing about, and I saw the lightning leave me, and my baby just can't take her eyes off me, because like Moses getting the 10 Commandments with like the 10 Commandments being etched with lightning, and seeing the lightning leave me and my baby, it's like Moses being like 71 in Pearland, and Babylon, like Moses is Babylon and Pearland, at the same time. It's like combining the thought of like of corporate and business law, of ascending and descending, of dimensional clause, and a 10-star general with like 5 commandments on each side, being like Texas, New Mexico power, and Texas, New Mexico power right now really is the issue, like about this location, like where I'm at and talking to you, like right now here in Pearland. In Centerpiint Energy, it seemed to be that Centerpiint Energy, the smart meter, is what it's known as presenting, the idea of Centerpiint. And somehow in my mind, it's presented the issue of being used as a transponder, likewise, region 0 of a carbon footprint, absentee voting, yet, trading energy as the North American Free Trade Act, or, what the deal is about NATO or North Atlantic Treaties Organization as compared to the P about the peace, North Atlantic Peace Treaties Organization, and the V, the V, the Richard Nixon, he's innocent thing about like a double bass drummer that like knows how to twirl with V twin figure 8 drumstick twirl. There seem to be like really involving all that and quote unquote thing about pronunciation and legal media and all that stuff about legal media and deposition and live on air, and Richard Nixon presenting that, and right now it seems to be like even involving what was in a television series, V series, originating some idea of the actress in Twin Peaks. Yet it presents the idea of like when you see a mountain climate, yet it presents the idea of television programming of the actress that actually does the Infinity commercial, yet Twin Peaks of Alaska and the Alaska pipeline from Alaska all the way to the Houston, Texas area. And like I'm in Pearland, Texas, like right on the border of like Houston on the south side, okay? And all these color codes that I've been referring to. But anyway, so I was kind of like wanting to keep that in mind because, the difference between bogey and a boogie is just like, whether you're at the right place at the right time at a country club on a 9-hole golf course, hearing the word bogey or Air Force, terminology of a pilot of like affirmative action, as normally, the word of like affirmative action of like pilots. But you hear it, as like golf terminology, on par, in that way. Yet, Michael Jackson, and you've heard it before about, the bogey and the boogie. And it seemed to be a thing about proper English numerical composition and how the pi r squared in practical application, finding the diameter of a circle based upon the formative computation of the formula, because it works. But in linguistic alphanumerics, just based upon pronunciation, it will provide like a symbolic and analytical approach, and it will actually create the second zero, the second O, and combine like the figure 8 at a vertical and 90 degree, like of the figure 8, and the infinite lines on the zoom lens, identified as infinity, as perfect 10-10 vision, even in astrology, using the stars, even in the planetarium. But anyway, I want to include that. I want to kind of keep it short, because I want to. It's already going on like 36 minutes and like 3 seconds right now. But I want to include that because I was thinking about that. Blame It on the Boogie with MichaelJackson5 and a 10-star general, and the E equal MC squared, and reading Braille, and a little bit of thing about the Naki Saki thing. But in any case, so like a little bit of humor about that. The reason being, it seemed to be like the novice idea of Babylon and Pearland, or some idea of relation, manufacturing, transparency as Babylon and Pearland, yet, foster granting like the idea of adoption in the form of like combining a student loan with a Pell Grant, as foster granting some idea of manufacturing relation between architecture platform, embedding encryption, and some idea of a novice attempt, and it seemed to be the humor about, like a screensaver and, television, in the way of like a, what relation is as wishful thinking in the direction, you know what I'm saying? But the thing of it is that, all that being manufactured, and realizing that it really is exactly that it had been manufactured as something that really seemed to be involving the idea of what relation is in a vice president network as a novice, some idea like, an entire lifetime in diapers in Babylon and Pearland. And I'm finding it to be like far beyond like not cool at all. For real. So like, in any case, but, yeah, so, I've been like really putting some brain work into, the situation, and, doing quite a bit of thing about, linguistic and alphanumerics and analytical in that way. But it seemed to be the thing about Michael Jackson's song, Blame It on a Boogie, and that song, Off the Wall CD, like 1979, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. And the thing about Off the Wall seemed to be about the graphite at the same time. The thing about Lockheed Martin, the 2 arrows of 4 lines and 3 intersecting axes, yet it seemed to present, the thing about the wall as a telepathic blueprint on the wall of a symmetrical, asymmetrical design representative of HTTP : // as compared to the ratio //. And it seemed to be, the difference between, the colon and the ratio being some idea between like the Arctic Circle as like a Swiss Klondike bar and a hockey puck. Or, I've thought about, the lines that would make the eccentric triangles, potentially, the // of Lockheed Martin's 2 arrows, with like 180 degree and a 90 degree. It would almost, I'll actually have to, I will have to actually look at it and decide if it's really what I'm thinking, that the lines that would be, with the Lockheed Martin arrows, it would be like the // with a 180 and a 90, at the same time presenting it as like the 135 degree of a hockey stick. And the thing about the Swiss Klondike bar and the hockey puck and the colon and HTTP : in the Arctic Circle. And it seemed to be something in that way, and I'm actually going to have to think about it if that's really what it is. And the 22.5 degree, based upon the architectural design of, dimensions of the symmetrical, asymmetrical design of the state, federal, local authority, structure. It presents that, and the 22.5 from like the center line of the window to the corner, in the center, and from the center of the mirror to the corner of the wall, the in the center, and yet the eccentric point of view of a paper-made pen presents a 22.5 degree in every way, and just that difference of it being eccentric of a shower wall, it's still a point of view using the paper-made pen, and paper may be in the 5610, being the Alpha-American 94 annotated adoption and abortion, which even seems to be, the idea of a novice attempt of, some idea of like Babylon, or, what relation is in that way, seem to present all the Alpha-Americans of annotated adoption and abortion, Roe v. Wade, and obstruction of justice, yet, suppression and loss prevention, and who's going to leave the bank is going to, go beyond the thought of like not ignoring human capital, is, the thought of maybe Zion and like the Mormon Church being the Christian religion, not an automatic perception as, some like naivety and being used as intellectual easement of a Vice President network based upon some novice attempt, not realizing, that a VPN presenting, importing, exporting, immigration, custom enforcement, and, a multitude of like international banking systems based upon television programming itself and on-site location. It obviously ultimately gets to really on-site location. But anyway, yeah, I just want to keep that in mind. It's already going on like 41 minutes and 15 seconds right now. But yeah, it seemed to be the thing about blame it on the boogie and Moses coming down from the plateau and the Lord Jesus Christ resurrecting and going to Mount Olives, and the thing about, re-entering heaven, and that one word of the books of Thessalonians, transfiguration being, the thing about re-entering heaven, Alpha-Americans 192. But anyway, yeah, I want to include that real quick and get this going, and this will be my first audio MP4 format recording. I actually tried to do an audio recording, but I hadn't, finished setting up the phone, and I didn't realize that it was cutting off because I didn't finish setting it up. But anyway, yeah, so like this is my first video I've recorded on this particular phone right here, and I'm fixing to upload it to my channel at WadeASV, pretty PRDDY at youtube.com. So like there it is for like right now, and all right, yeah, great. All right, have a good day, night, whatever it means to you, okay?